We spend so much of our lives looking for a place where we can finally take off the heavy armor we've carried for years. We search for it in external achievements, in the approval of the people around us, or in the perfect, flawless routine. We think if we can just build the perfect life, we will finally feel secure. But if you really pause, step back, and look at the reality of your day, how many times did you leave your own emotional house? How many times did you feel a sudden wave of anxiety or a heavy pang of loneliness and immediately walk out on yourself? We tend to treat our inner discomfort like an unwelcome guest. When it shows up at our door, we look for any excuse not to let it in. We distract ourselves instantly. We might mindlessly scroll through retail websites, looking at things we don't need, or suddenly decide to rearrange the entire living room furniture. We might fuss over a work presentation for hours, tweaking things that are already fine, or obsessively organize a closet. Anything to avoid sitting in the heavy quiet with what we are actually experiencing. We run away into tasks, productivity, and noise because the silence inside feels too loud. But true safety isn't the absence of discomfort. It's the absolute certainty that you will not abandon yourself when the discomfort arrives. Think about how hurtful it feels when you are upset and someone you love walks out of the room, leaving you alone with your pain. Yet, we do this to ourselves constantly. We feel a flicker of sickness or fear, and instead of staying with it, we mentally pack our bags and leave. We leave our bodies, we numb our minds, and we leave that hurting part of ourselves sitting alone in the dark. Every time you choose a distraction over your own feelings, you send a silent message to your inner self. You are too much to handle. Your pain is inconvenient. You are not worth staying for. Over time, this constant self-abandonment creates a deep, quiet ache. You stop trusting yourself because you know, subconsciously, that the moment things get difficult, you will run away. You become a refugee in your own life, constantly searching for external comfort to fill the void left by your own absence. Embracing internal safety means making a commitment to stop running. It means when the anxiety tightens in your throat or the sadness settles heavily in your chest, you choose to stay. You sit on the edge of the bed, breathe through the discomfort, and softly say to yourself, I am right here. I feel how much this hurts, but I am not going to leave you. It's about building a relationship with yourself where no emotion is too messy, no fear is too ugly, and no sorrow is too deep to be met with your own presence. You realize that you don't need the world to change for you to be okay. You just need to know that you will always show up for yourself. True sanctuary isn't a place out there in the world. It's the quiet decision to finally stay in the room with who you are. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Think about that for a moment. Let it really sink in. It's not the external world, with all its unpredictability and chaos, that terrifies us most. It's what happens when the noise fades, the distractions disappear, and we turn the lens completely inward. Complete self-acceptance means looking directly at the parts of you that feel messy, fragmented, or desperately sad, and making the conscious choice not to look away. It means facing the secrets you keep from yourself, the grief you've tried to outrun, and the quiet vulnerabilities you hide behind a strong exterior. For a very long time, you might have believed that staying safe meant keeping those hidden parts buried as deep as possible. You became a master at reading the room, scanning the faces of the people around you, and anticipating everyone else's needs before they even knew they had them. You learned how to mold yourself into whatever shape made other people comfortable, ensuring you never caused a ripple, never made a scene, and never asked for too much. You smiled when you wanted to cry, and you said you were fine when your inner world was crashing down around you. But hiding who you are just to keep the peace is a devastatingly heavy burden to carry. It creates a baseline of constant internal friction because a part of you always knows that you are compromising your own truth just to fit in. Every time you lock away a genuine feeling because you're afraid it will make you unlikable, you are telling yourself that the real you is defective, dangerous, or wrong. You begin to carry a profound weight, the weight of the unseen. It's the exhausting energy required to maintain a facade, to keep the lid tightly pressed down on a boiling pot of suppressed emotions. This unseen weight shows up in the quiet, unexpected moments of your life. It's that sudden, overwhelming exhaustion you feel at the end of the day, even if you didn't do anything physically demanding. It's that underlying sense of loneliness that persists even when you are surrounded by a room full of people who love you. That loneliness doesn't exist because people don't care about you. It exists because you aren't letting them see the person they are supposed to love. You are hiding behind a curtain of your own making, watching the world through a tiny slit, wondering if anyone would still stay if the curtain fell. True emotional safety begins when you decide that the burden of hiding is finally heavier than the fear of being seen. It starts when you look at that deep sadness, that buried anger, or that fragile insecurity, and you stop treating it like a defect. You realize that these unseen parts of you aren't bad. They are just lonely. They have been locked away in the basement of your mind for years, waiting for you to come down with a flashlight, not to judge them or fix them, but simply to acknowledge that they exist. When you finally allow yourself to be seen by your own eyes, without condemnation, the heavy armor begins to melt away, and the weight you've been carrying for a lifetime finally starts to lift. When we are younger, we build heavy emotional coping mechanisms to protect ourselves from being hurt, dismissed, or abandoned. If you grew up in an environment where your emotions were minimized, ridiculed, or treated as an inconvenience, you quickly learned that showing your true self wasn't safe. You had to adapt to survive. Maybe you became the flawless overachiever who never made a mistake and never complained, thinking that if you were perfect enough, you would finally be worthy of love. Or perhaps you became the quiet, invisible one who never demanded space, never asked for anything, and faded into the background so you wouldn't cause trouble or invite conflict. That armor worked back then. It served a beautiful, vital purpose. It protected your fragile, tender heart from a world that didn't know how to hold it gently. It kept you safe during times when you didn't have the power, the words, or the resources to protect yourself. It was your shield, your fortress, and your survival strategy. And you should honor that armor for getting you all the way to where you are today. The profound problem is we grow up, but we completely forget to take the armor off. We carry these heavy, rigid metal plates into our adult relationships, our careers, our friendships, and into the quiet moments we spend entirely alone. We walk around every single day, braced for a blow that is no longer coming. Suddenly, the very shield that used to protect you from the outside world starts to suffocate and isolate you from the inside. It blocks out the bad things, yes, but it also blocks out the warmth, the genuine connection, the joy, and the deep peace you so desperately crave. When you wear this armor for too long, you start to realize it has created a prison of your own making. You want people to get close to you, but the moment they try, your defense systems flare up. You might push them away, pick a fight, or shut down completely, because emotional closeness feels like a threat to the safety your armor provides. You become trapped behind a wall of your own design. You might look at your life from behind the visor of your helmet, watching other people experience effortless warmth and deep vulnerability, wondering why it feels so impossibly far out of reach for you. You are constantly exhausted because holding up a heavy shield every single hour of every single day takes an immense amount of life force energy. Recognizing that you don't need that old armor anymore is the first real, terrifying step toward building genuine internal safety. It requires you to look at your adult life and realize that the threats of your past are no longer the reality of your present. The people around you now are not the people who hurt you then. And even more importantly, you are no longer that helpless child who couldn't defend themselves. You have agency now. You have a voice. You have the ability to walk away from spaces that do not respect your boundaries. Letting go of the armor doesn't happen all at once. It happens when you slowly, gently untie the first strap. It's the moment you choose to tell someone you love that your feelings were hurt, instead of shutting down for 3 days. It's the moment you allow yourself to cry in front of another person, or admit that you don't have all the answers and desperately need help. When you lay that heavy metal down on the floor, your skin feels raw and the air feels cold at first. But in that softness, in that uncovered space, is where you finally become accessible to love, to healing, and to yourself. You realize that true strength isn't about being bulletproof. It's about having the courage to be completely open. Your mind is incredibly skilled at rationalizing away your pain. It can try to convince you that everything is fine, that you are overreacting, or that you should just snap out of it and move on. But your physical self cannot lie. Your body holds the true, unedited record of your life's experiences. It is a ledger where every unexpressed tear, every swallowed word, and every moment of terror is quietly written down. Think about those moments in your everyday life that you usually dismiss. Think about how your shoulders suddenly tighten and rise toward your ears during a casual conversation with a colleague, or the way your stomach twists into a tight, hard knot before you even open your mouth to speak. Remember that heavy, hollow feeling that settles deep in your chest when you feel misunderstood, or the way your breath becomes shallow and rapid when someone raises their voice, even if they aren't shouting at you. Those aren't random physical malfunctions. That isn't just stress or a lack of sleep. That is your physical self speaking a profound language of its own, trying desperately to signal to you that something in your environment or your dynamics feels unsafe, familiar, or misaligned. When we lack emotional safety within ourselves, we tend to abandon our bodies entirely and live exclusively in our heads. We retreat upstairs to our minds because it feels less painful than staying downstairs in our physical frames. We analyze, we overthink, we ruminate, and we plan 3 steps ahead, desperately trying to predict every outcome to avoid any potential emotional discomfort. We think, if we can just figure everything out intellectually, we will finally be safe. But you cannot think your way into safety. Safety is not a thought. Safety is a deeply felt physical state. When you spend years ignoring the body's ledger, the ledger only speaks louder. The quiet whisper of a tight muscle eventually turns into the scream of chronic exhaustion, persistent tension, or a nervous system that feels constantly wired and running on empty. You find yourself trapped in a state of high alert, waiting for the next shoe to drop, unable to truly rest, even when you are lying in a comfortable bed in a completely quiet room. You are safe in reality, but your body is still living in the memory of the battlefield. Healing this disconnect requires you to stop treating your physical tension as an enemy to be drugged, ignored, or pushed aside. It means learning to treat these sensations as a signal to be listened to with deep compassion. The next time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, or that sudden rush of heat in your throat, instead of trying to distract yourself or forcing yourself to just push through it, try to soften toward it. Imagine sitting down next to that physical discomfort the way you would sit next to a frightened child. You don't need to fix it immediately, and you don't need to force it to go away. You just need to acknowledge it. Breathe into the tight spaces and let your body know, I am paying attention now. I feel how hard you are working to protect me, and I am right here with you. When you stop running from what your body is trying to tell you, the ledger stops being a record of accumulated pain and starts becoming your truest compass, guiding you back to a place of genuine, grounded peace. It's easy to read books about self-acceptance and it's easy to intellectually understand the concepts of healing. We can talk about our patterns, analyze our childhoods, and use all the right terminology with our friends. But transitioning from a cold intellectual understanding to actual lived internal safety requires a massive shift in how we react to our own pain in the moments it matters most. Usually, when a difficult emotion rises to the surface, our immediate, instinctive response is shielding. We put up a barrier. We become analytical and clinical with ourselves. We ask, why am I feeling this? I shouldn't be upset about this anymore. I thought I worked through this in therapy. Why am I letting this bother me? We jump straight into trying to fix the emotion, analyze it, or figure it out, bypassing the actual feeling entirely. We treat our emotions like a math problem that needs to be solved, or a glitch in the system that needs to be reprogrammed. But your heart is not a machine, and your pain is not a math problem. When you rush to analyze a feeling the second it arrives, you aren't actually comforting yourself. You are just shielding yourself from having to feel it. You are pushing the emotion away with the hand of intellect, holding it at arm's length, because looking it in the eyes feels too terrifying. Before we can analyze the grand architecture of our psychological patterns, we have to simply sit with the raw building blocks. We have to learn the art of holding. Holding is the exact opposite of shielding. Shielding is rigid, defensive, and panicked. Holding is soft, spacious, and patient. Think about how a loving parent holds a child who is sobbing. A good parent doesn't look at a crying 5-year-old and say, let's analyze the root cause of this tantrum and look at your behavioral patterns. They don't demand an explanation, and they don't tell the child they shouldn't be crying. They just open their arms. They pull the child close. They let them cry, and they offer a safe container for the grief until the storm passes. This is exactly what we must learn to do for ourselves. When you feel that familiar tightness grip your throat, or that sudden, desperate urge to run away into a distraction, try to pause. Just for 60 seconds. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to figure out who caused it, what it means for your future, or how to make it disappear. Instead of asking why, try asking what. What does this feeling need right now? Does it need validation? Does it just need a few minutes of quiet, uninterrupted attention? Moving from analyzing your emotions to actually holding space for them is how the deep internal shift begins. It means dropping out of the courtroom of your mind and stepping into the living room of your heart. It means saying to a wave of sudden sadness, I don't entirely understand where you came from today, but you are allowed to be here. I am not going to judge you, and I am not going to force you to leave before you are ready. When you transition from shielding against your pain to holding it with compassion, you stop viewing your own emotional sensitivity as a threat. You realize that you are vast enough, strong enough, and loving enough to hold every single piece of your experience without breaking. This brings us to a much deeper, more tender layer of understanding our inner landscape. Carl Jung described this beautifully when he noted, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Let's be very clear about what that word means. The darkness he referred to isn't something evil, malicious, or broken within you. It's simply the shadow side of your personality. It is made up of all the traits, impulses, and raw emotions that you've judged as unacceptable over the course of your life. Maybe it's your deep-seated anger, your intense jealousy, your hidden selfishness, or your profound, aching vulnerability. If you spent your childhood being told that being angry makes you unlikable or dangerous, you learned to bury that anger as deep down as it could go. You swallowed it, smiled through the resentment, and pretended it didn't exist. But when you bury a fundamental part of yourself, you create a permanent zone of unsafety within your own identity. You are essentially telling a part of your own soul that it is too ugly to live in the light. To feel truly secure, you have to be willing to walk down into those shadowed corners of your mind, not with a weapon to destroy what you find, but with a flashlight and an open heart, realizing those parts are not monstrous. They are just wounded parts of you, waiting to be acknowledged. Think about how much energy it takes to keep a beach ball pressed underwater. You can do it for a while, but your arms get tired. Your focus is entirely consumed by holding it down. And eventually, the moment your grip slips, it explodes to the surface with chaotic force. That is exactly what happens when we try to exile our shadow. The anger we try so hard to hide leaks out as passive aggression or sudden, explosive outbursts over tiny things. The vulnerability we try to suppress turns into defensive walls that keep the people who love us at a distance. We become terrified of our own inner world because we are constantly afraid that the bad parts of us will escape and ruin everything. Embracing the shadow means ending the civil war inside your own mind. It means looking at your jealousy and realizing it's just a distorted arrow pointing toward a desire you haven't allowed yourself to pursue. It means looking at your anger and recognizing it as a fierce, protective boundary that is trying to tell you your boundaries have been crossed. It means looking at your deep need for attention and realizing it's just the echo of a child who was never truly seen for who they were. When you stop treating your hidden flaws like enemies and start treating them like family members who have been left out in the cold, the entire internal dynamic changes. You sit at the table with your messy pieces. You look at your fear, your rage, and your imperfections, and you say, "I see you. You don't have to hide in the dark anymore. You belong to me, too." In that moment of radical honesty, the shadow loses its terrifying power over you. You realize that true wholeness doesn't mean being perfect. It means being undivided. You finally stop running from your own reflection, and you find a deep, unshakable peace in knowing that you can face the entirety of who you are without turning away. A common, deeply painful trap on the path of healing is waiting for the perfect external environment before we allow ourselves to feel secure. We fall into the habit of bargaining with our own well-being. We tell ourselves, once I finally get that new job, or once I'm in a stable, loving relationship, or once my finances are completely sorted out and my schedule clears up, then I will finally relax. Then I will work on my nervous system. And then I will feel safe. We treat emotional safety like a luxury item that we can only afford once every single external bill is paid and every problem is solved. But life rarely, if ever, stops moving. The world outside of us is inherently unstable, unpredictable, and chaotic. If your peace depends entirely on the world behaving perfectly, on people treating you exactly how you need them to, or on your to-do list being completely empty, you will always be at the mercy of circumstances. You will live your life on a roller coaster, constantly reactive, riding high on a good day and crashing into despair the moment something goes wrong. If your peace is conditional, it isn't actually peace. It is just temporary relief. True internal safety means building a solid, unshakable foundation, regardless of the storm that is raging outside your window. It is the quiet, fierce knowing that even if a project fails, even if a relationship ends, even if a plan you worked months for falls completely through, the core of who you are remains entirely intact. You learn to become your own anchor, so that when the ground inevitably shifts beneath your feet, you don't lose your balance and wash away into the sea. Think about how much time we waste waiting for a better time to breathe, to heal, or to be kind to ourselves. We look at the stress in our lives, and we think the stress is the problem. But the stress is just life happening. The real problem is that we abandon ourselves the moment the stress arrives. We stop sleeping well, we skip our meals, we berate ourselves for feeling overwhelmed, and we tell our inner self, I don't have time for your anxiety right now. We have to survive this week first. By doing this, we create a secondary storm inside our own minds that is far more destructive than the external pressure we are facing. Embracing safety amidst imperfection means breaking the illusion that a struggle-free life exists. It means looking at your messy, complicated, unfinished life right now, with the unpaid bills, the strained relationships, the career uncertainties, and the emotional wounds, and deciding that you are worthy of safety today. Not next month, not when you lose 10 pounds or get a promotion. Today. It's the realization that you don't need a perfect life to have a peaceful heart. You can sit in the middle of a chaotic week, take a deep breath, and let your body soften. You can look at the uncertainty of your future and say, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And that is terrifying. But I do know that whatever happens, I will be right here to hold my own hand through it. When you shift your focus from trying to control the uncontrollable world to anchoring your own internal presence, you break free from the trap of perfect conditions. You realize that the sanctuary you've been waiting for isn't a destination you reach. It's a capacity you carry within yourself every single step of the way. Take a quiet moment right now to listen to the voice that plays in your head when you make a mistake. When you accidentally drop a glass on the kitchen floor and it shatters. When you miss an important deadline at work. Or when you say something slightly awkward or clumsy in a meeting with your peers. What does that inner voice say to you? For many of us, if we are completely honest, that voice is harsher, colder, and more abusive than any external critic would ever dare to be. It instantly flashes with anger, using words like stupid, failure, unlovable, or completely incapable. It takes a tiny human error and uses it as absolute proof that you are fundamentally defective. You cannot feel safe in a house where the resident voice is constantly attacking you. Imagine living with a roommate who followed you from room to room, pointing out every flaw, criticizing how you spoke, mocking your fears, and reminding you of your past failures every single hour of the day. You would feel constantly anxious, defensive, and exhausted. You would feel completely unsafe in your own home. Yet, this is exactly what we do to ourselves inside the privacy of our own minds. We allow a cruel, unforgiving inner critic to run the narrative of our lives. And then we wonder why we feel so incredibly anxious, insecure, and disconnected from our own worth. Rewriting this internal dialogue isn't about toxic positivity. It isn't about looking in the mirror and forcing yourself to repeat generic phrases that you don't actually believe. Nor is it about pretending that everything is perfect and that you never make mistakes. It is about cultivating basic, foundational, human decency toward your own soul. It is about realizing that your worth as a human being is not tied to your productivity, your perfection, or your performance. When things go wrong, an emotionally safe person doesn't join in on the condemnation. They step in as a supportive, compassionate ally, reminding themselves that mistakes are simply human data points, not definitions of their character. Think about how you would speak to a friend who came to you crying because they made a mistake at work. You wouldn't yell at them. You wouldn't list all their past failures or tell them they are worthless. You would look them in the eyes, listen to their grief, and say, "It's okay. You were tired. You were under a lot of pressure, and you made a mistake. We can fix this together. You are still a good person." Why is it that we can offer this gentle, healing grace to everyone else in the world, but we refuse to offer even a fraction of it to ourselves? Why do we believe that we only deserve love when we are flawless? Changing this pattern requires you to start paying close attention to the tone of your mind. It means the next time you fail or feel inadequate, you catch that harsh voice mid-sentence. You pause, you take a deep breath, and you consciously choose to change the narrative. You gently tell that critic, "Thank you for trying to keep me perfect so I won't get hurt, but I don't need that harshness anymore." Then you speak to yourself with the warmth you've always deserved. You say, "This is a really hard moment, and it's okay that I'm struggling. I am doing the best I can with what I have right now." When you change the way you talk to yourself in the dark, the entire internal atmosphere shifts. You realize that you no longer have to be perfect to be protected, because your own voice has finally become a safe place to land. We often view boundaries as harsh, cold walls that we build to keep other people out. We worry that if we draw a line, we are being selfish, mean, or uncaring. But in reality, boundaries are not weapons used to push people away. They are the invisible lines we draw to keep our own self-respect and sanity intact. They are the ultimate act of self-preservation. When you constantly say "weto" to things you desperately want to say no to, whether it's taking on extra work you don't have the physical capacity for, or staying in draining, one-sided conversations that exhaust your spirit, you are sending a devastating message to your inner self. Their comfort matters more than your peace. Their needs are important, but yours are an afterthought. Every single time you compromise a boundary just to avoid someone else's temporary displeasure or discomfort, you trade away a piece of your own internal security. You are practicing self-betrayal in the name of people-pleasing. You think you are keeping the peace, but you are actually just moving the conflict from the outside to the inside. The room might be quiet, but a war is raging inside your chest. You become filled with a slow, toxic resentment toward the very people you are trying so hard to please. And even worse, you lose faith in your own ability to protect yourself. You feel exposed and unsafe because you know that you will always sacrifice your own well-being just to keep someone else happy. Think about how exhausting it is to live without these protective lines. You become like a house with no doors and no fences, where anyone can walk in at any time, track mud across your clean floors, disrupt your peace, and leave you to clean up the mess alone. You are left feeling chronically depleted, resentful, and hollowed out. You might find yourself snapping at the people you love over tiny things, or wanting to pull away and isolate yourself completely, simply because you don't have any energy left to give. This isn't because you are a bad person, or because you don't care. It is because you have given away parts of yourself that were never meant to be sold. Learning to set boundaries means having the courage to face the discomfort of disappointing others so you can stop disappointing yourself. It means realizing that no is a complete sentence that does not require a lengthy apology or a detailed defense. Saying, "I cannot take that project on right now," or "I love you, but I need some quiet space to think about this before I answer," is an act of profound self-allegiance. It is a declaration to your own heart that you are finally willing to step up and protect your time, your emotional energy, and your mental peace. When you first begin to practice this, it will feel intensely uncomfortable. You will feel a wave of guilt, and your old patterns will scream that you are being selfish. But guilt is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is simply proof that you are breaking a habit of self-abandonment. Over time, as you hold your ground, that guilt will transform into a deep, solid sense of personal power. You show your internal self that you are a safe person to live with, a person who cannot be negotiated out of their own well-being. You realize that the people who truly belong in your life will respect your boundaries, and the ones who get angry at your lines are simply the ones who benefited from you having none. By honoring your own limits, you create a safe, sacred space where your soul can finally rest and breathe. Building emotional safety within yourself is a quiet, hidden, and deeply daily practice. It is not something that happens during a single, massive breakthrough moment on a mountaintop, nor is it a final destination that you reach where you never feel afraid or insecure ever again. It doesn't arrive with a certificate or a sudden dramatic shift in your external reality. Instead, it happens entirely in the dark, in the hundreds of tiny, seemingly insignificant choices you make every single day when no one else is watching. It is the choice you make at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a stressful Tuesday, when the anxiety starts to grip your chest and your old habit screams at you to numb out, to run away, or to drown your feelings in frantic activity. It is the choice to pause, drop your shoulders, and stay right there in your body instead. It is choosing kind, soft language over harsh self-criticism when you accidentally make a mistake that messes up your schedule. It is choosing to validate your own deep feelings, to look at your own sadness and say, I understand why you are hurting, even when the entire rest of the world tells you that you are overreacting or that you should just get over it. For so many years, you have likely lived your life like an exile, wandering from place to place, person to person, desperately searching for a sanctuary where you would finally be fully accepted, fully seen, and completely safe. You looked for that safety in the arms of people who didn't know how to love themselves, let alone you. You looked for it in the validation of bosses, friends, and strangers, hoping that if they praised you enough, the hollow ache inside your chest would finally stop throbbing. You chased milestones, thinking that the next achievement, the next relationship, or the next change of scenery would be the thing that finally allowed you to take a deep, unrestricted breath. But external validation is a fickle, shifting shadow. It is a well that constantly runs dry, leaving you thirstier than you were before. When you depend on the world outside to tell you that you matter, you are always living on borrowed time. You are always waiting for the other shoe to drop, constantly terrified that if you make one wrong move, show one flaw, or express one inconvenient emotion, the safety you worked so hard to build will be instantly snatched away from you. You remain a permanent guest in someone else's house, walking on eggshells, trying to make sure you don't leave any scuff marks on the floor. When you commit to the daily, gentle practice of internal safety, something beautiful and quiet begins to happen deep within your spirit. The desperate, panicked search for external validation starts to slowly lose its grip on you. The frantic urge to fix everyone else's perception of you begins to fade away into the background. You stop looking for everyone else in the room to look at you and tell you that you are okay, because you have finally turned inward and set it to yourself. You stop asking for permission to exist, permission to take up space, and permission to feel what you feel. Think about what it truly feels like to come home after a long, exhausting journey through a harsh, unforgiving storm. It is the feeling of opening your own front door, stepping inside, and hearing the heavy lock click securely into place behind you. It is the moment you drop your heavy bags on the floor, shed the damp, stiff clothes that have been weighing you down, and let your body sink completely into a familiar, welcoming chair. The storm may still be howling outside the window. The wind might still be rattling the glass, and the rain might still be pouring down in sheet after sheet. But it doesn't matter anymore. The storm cannot touch you here. You are inside. You are warm. You are protected. This is exactly what it feels like to come home to yourself. It is the profound realization that the sanctuary you have spent your entire life searching for out there in the world, in the accolades, the perfect relationships, the external security, has actually been waiting for you inside your own skin all along. It was never something you had to earn, buy, or convince someone else to give you. It was a capacity you always possessed, a quiet room inside your own heart that you simply forgot how to access. When you are home in yourself, you become your own ultimate protector. When sadness arrives, you don't panic. You open the door and let it rest until it is ready to leave. When fear knocks, you don't lock yourself in the closet. You sit down with it, wrap a blanket around its shoulders, and soothe it with your own steady, grounded breathing. When you make a mistake, you don't join the chorus of critics trying to tear you down. You stand as a fierce shield between your soul and the harshness of the world, reminding yourself that your worth is absolute, non-negotiable, and completely independent of your flaws. You begin to recognize that you are a whole, vast ecosystem capable of surviving any weather. You have survived the worst days of your past. You have navigated the moments when you felt completely broken. And you have carried yourself through the darkest nights of your life without anyone else knowing how heavy the burden was. You did that. Your own internal strength, your own resilient spirit got you here. You have always been the one saving yourself, even when you thought you were completely helpless. So, let the search end today. Let the running stop. Let yourself drop the heavy luggage of everyone else's expectations, judgments, and demands at the door. Step into the quiet space of your own presence. Look at your messy, beautiful, sensitive, and deeply human self with eyes of absolute compassion and unconditional love. Take a long, deep breath, the kind of breath your body has been waiting years to take, and let your nervous system finally settle into the earth beneath you. You no longer have to perform to be worthy of a safe place to land. You no longer have to hide your wounds, apologize for your sensitivity, or pretend to be bulletproof just to survive the day. The door is wide open, the fire is lit, and the space is entirely yours. You are finally home. The long exile is over, and you can rest now, knowing with absolute, unshakable certainty You are safe with you. If you take only one thing from these words, let it be this: building a sanctuary inside your own skin is not a linear journey, nor is it a race to be won. There will be days when the old armor feels tempting, when the weight of the unseen feels too heavy, and when your mind tries to convince you that running away is the only way to survive. There will be moments when you slip back into the courtroom of your mind, listening to that harsh inner critic, or when you find yourself anxiously waiting for perfect external conditions before you allow yourself to breathe. When those days happen, and they will, please remember that slipping back into old patterns is not a sign of failure. It is simply a sign that you are human, navigating a deeply ingrained blueprint that took a lifetime to build. Healing is not about never feeling unsafe again. It is about reducing the time it takes for you to realize you've left the room, and having the gentle courage to walk back inside. It is the ability to catch yourself in the middle of a self-critique. Pause, soften your tone, and say, I'm doing that thing again. Let me take a breath and step back. True wholeness does not mean you become a person who is completely detached, unemotional, or perfectly serene at all times. To be fully alive means to feel the entire spectrum of the human experience. You will still feel sudden anger when your boundaries are crossed. You will still feel acute grief when things end, and you will still feel the chill of fear when facing the unknown. The difference is that you will no longer look at these emotional waves as evidence that you are broken. You will view them as passing weather patterns moving through a sky that is vast enough, wide enough, and strong enough to hold them all. You are the sky, not the weather. The storms will come and go, but the space inside you remains. As you move forward from this moment, make a quiet, non-negotiable promise to the person you are living with inside your own mind. Promise that you will stop treating your sensitivity as a defect. Promise that you will pay attention to the quiet ledger of your body, honoring its tension and its exhaustion instead of pushing past its limits. Promise that you will speak to yourself in the dark with the same fierce, protective kindness that you would offer to someone you love more than life itself. Take one final, slow breath into the deepest center of your chest. Feel the rise and fall of your own physical frame, the steady, rhythmic proof that you are here, that you are alive, and that you have everything you need to hold your own hand through whatever comes next. The long, exhausting exile of searching for a home outside of yourself is finally over. You have stepped across the threshold. You have closed the door on self-abandonment, and you have chosen to stay.